From the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., this is the Tyler's Place Podcast, a podcast by Freemasons, for Freemasons, brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the World. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards, 32nd Degree, KCCH. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel. There is a lot of fantastic Scottish Rite and Freemason content on there for you to explore. Also, we are now on Spotify, so if you're not listening to this on Spotify, make sure you check out the Spotify feed. There's tons and tons of podcasts on there that we've been uploading. You should definitely check those out. And if you want to reach out and say hi, always email me, podcast@scottishrite.org. If you are a Scottish Rite Freemason and you have gotten your September 2022 issue of the Scottish Rite Journal in your mailbox, on the cover you will see Brother Gary Norman. Gary is visually impaired, but that has not stopped him from doing anything. I mean, seriously, nothing. He's a very successful lawyer, and he's also a past master of his lodge, Mount Moriah Lodge in Towson, Maryland. And Gary joins us now on the Tyler's Place podcast. Gary, let's jump right into this. I don't want to just list your LinkedIn profile and go through everything on there, but your accolades, your accomplishments, it's all very impressive. How do you introduce or identify yourself when you meet people?
I have a lot of identities. I think the easiest identity that people can see, observe, or feel is that I am visually impaired or these days blind. Therefore, I do work with a guide dog, now my third, as my mobility aid, but also my partnership in life of choice. On the other hand, I have so many other rich identities by the Grand Architect, including, like you said, that of being a lawyer, that of being a columnist, that of being a coach and a consensus builder. And any given day, I'm confronted with kind of how do I balance the identity that's always with me, which is being visually impaired, but also how do I just kind of be Gary, a lawyer, a consensus builder, somebody who I think has a lot of gifts and a lot of skills from the Grand Architect. And that's sort of how I frame things. And then typically I would say, in terms of specifically to this question, I'm a lawyer with a disability. And then, of course, most of the time in the right context, I usually just say I'm a Mason or a past master.
With all of the things that you do, how did you, what was it that inspired you to take on the mantle of Freemason?
I think it's a couple of things. Number one, in the law and in my education and with Masonry, I think it's been a call of the Grand Architect. I think of my life as an adventure, kind of like in the Hobbit books by Tolkien of Ireland/the UK. I feel like the Grand Architect has given me so many opportunities and so many partnerships that has led me from my small village of Northeast Ohio to the DC corridor. And I'm forever thankful for that. And then it also, in that regard, led me to Masonry. Masonry, I think, was of interest and fascinated to me because of a few factors. Number one, my surrogate uncle back in Northeast Ohio made it to being a fellow craft in Michigan. So I had some contextual background about Masonry. Number two, as someone who has history, basically any form of the past as his first love, and also an oath as an old honor society guy of Phi Alpha Theta to use history to improve humanity. I think this idea of sort of the history and the moral arcana of Masonry really fascinated me and was something that I thought I could continue to learn from. And then number three, I think in some ways, not being a native of the DC corridor, I knew that this, as one of the great fraternities, would have this rich network of connections and friendships and perhaps even life-altering relationships that I could benefit from, if not be shaped from. And that has been true. I have met wonderful men in the craft who have shaped me and influenced me for sure, from a World War II veteran to my kind of leadership coach during the exemplifications then as now, men that I just really look up to.
So your Masonic career, you most recently, when did you serve as the master of your lodge? I should say, you remember Mount Moriah Lodge or Corinthian? Which one was it? It's Mount Moriah, correct?
I was worshipful master in 2020 in Mount Moriah.
Mount Moriah.
Either for good or for woe during the height of the pandemic.
That had to have been a challenge. But let's go to 2019 when you're preparing to take the East. Maryland is one of the states still where the master does the vast majority of the degree work, including 3 very lengthy lectures. And
yes.
I don't like to use this word cheat, but we cheat a little bit. We've got some cipher books that have the lectures in them to give us a little hint. But being visually impaired, you wouldn't have had to benefit for that. So you had to really go through the whole mouth to ear process in its most legitimate form.
Yeah, I still struggle whether we should modify that or not. I can say for myself that I don't want to be the kind of person who says I walked up 5 miles in the snow every year, right? So I did do it the ancient mouth to ear method, and I'm proud of that, actually.
Oh, as well you should be. It's no small task.
I like the history. I like the process of that. That may not be for everybody, I realize. And indeed, I can also even recognize that maybe there could be some sort of exceptional past Army veteran officer who could make a great worshipful master, but maybe he has some sort of medical challenges where memorizing that material just would be very difficult. I, however, would err on the side of trying to have most people, if they don't have a reasonable exception, to do it the mouth to ear way like I did.
So managing a lodge in and of itself is a challenge, and managing a lodge during the pandemic was a unique challenge. As worshipful master guiding a lodge through that 2020 quarter, because I'm a Maryland Mason, I'm the sitting worshipful master of my mother lodge, which is a Mount Ararat in Bel Air, Maryland.
You're a good friend of one of the men that I mentioned that I admire. That is a good friend of mine, our treasurer at Corinthian, I believe.
Who's your treasurer this year?
Joe Creamer.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Brother Joe is a good dear friend. I've known Joe for many a year, and a past master of your lodge.
Yes.
The thing that I wonder about is that we were shut down for a few months, which means, and it started in March. So just as worshipful masters are getting their momentum going for the year, we hit that brick wall, and then July comes back on. What were the challenges that you faced in that 2020 period?
Well, I think it's easy to kind of feel disappointed in my year's worshipful master, or it's kind of easy to say, oh yeah, I triumphed because of this global pandemic. I was blessed to have 2 major leadership challenges and also learning experiences during the pandemic. On the Masonic side, I was worshipful master. On the civilian side, I was chair of the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, and both really were presented with many challenges because of the pandemic. On the lodge side, I think the challenges were really having this opportunity, really a learning opportunity to pivot from how I envisioned my year, which would be this great year where we would really do some fundamental cultural change in Mount Moriah, do events in the way that I like to do them, and maybe make a bunch of new Master Masons. And of course, we know that the pandemic posed many challenges for that. So it's kind of easy to feel like somehow I missed out on hosting this event or that event or raising this number X of brothers. On the other hand, I feel very proud of how I kept and how we built a team that connected the lodge during a major health crisis, how we pivoted to online events like some social happy hours, sort of what I called Mount Moriah port sessions, which were not tiled communications, but were sort of meetings without being tiled, if you know what I mean, that had speakers usually, or just opportunities to bring people together on Zoom. And then I was also proud as a historian by heart of my messages. I did 3 or 4 of these that I called fireside chats that were audio messages. And also as a lifelong singer and lover of music, each of my messages, I tried to gear the writing and the text around music that seemed to fit with that message. So we issued about 3 or 4 of those. And then I was also proud that we worked with the police and the fire in Towson to kind of get them some food and some good care during the pandemic. And most of all, I'm proud that we set a good line of officers that should keep Mount Moriah instead towards the future for probably 5 years or so.
Now, did you just do one tour of duty in the East, or did you pick? Because a lot of worship, and I don't know the answer to this. A lot of worshipful masters in 2020 stuck around through 2021 for the exact reason you're mentioning. A little difficult not to feel disappointed. But I think Mount Moriah moved forward.
Yes, Mount Moriah has a strong tradition of 1-year masters, so we continued that tradition in my tenure.
Excellent. Well, I mean, that's a real credit to you anyway, just to having the next leader take over and having that man be prepared, especially in a state like Maryland where there is so much ritual work that must be memorized. Just to guide someone through that is the master's job, and that's to your credit as well. So
I appreciate that. December
comes and we start to round the corner on the pandemic, and they're handing you your past master's medal. I understand from some Mark and from other folks that they had a special honor for one of your guide dogs. So let's talk a little bit about your guide dogs. And did I hear they were honored as a past master as well, an honorary past master?
Yeah, sort of. Good brothers who really understand blindness, and I think there are many brothers like that in Mount Moriah. Really recognize the special relationship that I had first with Brother Pilot, who unfortunately passed away about 2 weeks before I was installed as worshipful master in 2020, and also Brother Bowie. So I worked Pilot from June 2010 until November 2017.
And these are your guide dogs?
These are my guide dogs.
Yes, sir.
And then I was sort of raised in a way with Brother Pilot in October of 2013, when I received my pin, my Bible, those kinds of emoluments of being raised. My brothers, without me knowing, in direction, partnership with the Worshipful Master, bought Brother Pilot a Masonic pin for his collar that Keith Newsnoff made for me. And that was one of the most touching things I've ever had on a blindness level, I think. And then Brother Bowie, as soon as I obtained him at a new school in New York and came back and was junior warden in 2019, I felt like pretty much off as soon as we got into Lodge, started doing degree work, and he would sit with me in the South, the brothers started accepting him and starting to learn more about blindness and guide dogs. And that has led to so many rich stories and rich relationships. So both at Mount Moriah and I think now at Corinthian, the brothers sort of recognize Bowie as honorary past master, my current guide dog.
It's a very wonderful and touching thing that the brothers were able to do that for you, and for, as I like you, I love you calling him Brother Bowie. It's a very, I mean, I'm a dog lover myself, and I understand that these are more than just dogs. These in many ways are a real companion and something that really helps you navigate the world in a more traditional manner. And I think it's just wonderful that those brothers were able to do that for you and for him.
Yeah, to the extent we were in East, which was January through beginning of March, and then I would say September, October, November, December of 2020, Boyle was in the East every night with me.
That's fantastic, and it's a fantastic story, and I know that they're going to share a portion of that in our article in the Scottish Rite Journal, for an article that you penned for which magazine was it? It slips my mind right now.
It's the Journal. I'm not sure what you guys call it, but it's, I think, sort of the main scholastic journal. It's certainly footnoted, which is not surprising for people who know me. And it's sort of a discussion of my two favorite symbols. And because of the rich blessings I've had, both to have these dogs and also to be visually impaired, that brings me a different perspective than others. I tend to brand a lot of my writing speaking around the things that I've learned from working with dogs. So I connect the symbols to what I've learned from Masonry and also what I've learned from dogs. That really translates those symbols into my life on a daily basis. And speaking of your life as a daily basis, it's obvious that your disability, and I hate even calling it that, because looking at your list of accolades, it doesn't seem like there's much of a disability there, but your unique characteristic, let's say, of being visually impaired, it certainly shaped your career as a lawyer, as an advocate, as a public servant, and obviously that has played some role in your Masonry. How has Masonry influenced those same aspects of your life? I imagine it has played quite a big role in your life to date. I don't think my journey has ever been simple, for sure. Even with the Masonry, I've met people who still need a lot of education, but I have met men who look up to me. And you know what? When you're looked up to, that gives you even more of a responsibility to be better, to do better, to learn more. And my coach and my exemplification process is one big, huge influence on me and how I think of myself, even today, more so than in the past. I would show up to practice. And one thing that he said as a footnote to when we first started working together, is that old Army guy says, if I want to work with you, I don't care if you're blue, green, or otherwise. You're going to learn all this material. We're going to learn it in a year and a quarter, and you're going to show up 5 minutes early to every class, every time we meet together. And it wouldn't matter if I showed up, if I was having a bad day, if I had a bad interaction with someone at the coffee cart, or my screen reader wasn't working, or Bowie was frustrating me by not doing what I thought he should do. I would show up and he would say, feel the mirror. You have 5 minutes. It's time to get to work. And I think that is a big way that I now think about myself. I think about myself as Gary, a Mason, a lawyer, a public servant, who also happens to be visually impaired or blind. And then most of all, I really sort of think of myself as a dog handler. My context, it happens to be a guide dog or a service animal. And that's sort of what the Grand Architect has designed for me. I would hope that if I were somebody else, not that I want to be somebody else, it would still be some sort of dog. It may be a military dog or another kind of service animal even, because I think I've been especially gifted to have relationships with the outdoors and most living creatures in my life.
I love the fact that, we give grouchy old past masters a hard time for being grouchy old past masters, but the fact that you show up and it's time for you to go through your learning, and this grouchy old past master is not going to let you off the hook, that's where they really demonstrate their value with saying, nose to the grindstone, kid, you're going to do this. I think it's cool that he didn't let you off the hook.
And then my wife also can kind of use it to keep me on the right track too. At Corinthian, I serve as chaplain. And I've actually, not that I even pretend this is the same thing, but I've always had this call to religious service, or to clergy, actually.
Sure.
I have a very strong, quiet faith. And whenever I want to kind of give in to my intemperance, which is my weakest of the 4 virtues, actually, she says, don't be like Gary Norman, be Chaplain Norman. And that has really made a difference in my life this past year.
Don't you hate it when your lady uses masonry against you like that?
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you that, and this is an opinion question. You obviously, in your capacity as an advocate in your state service and public service, and as a Mason, you've had the opportunity to speak with other people who have different disabilities. And I don't just mean visual impairment. I mean, all kinds of different abilities and disabilities that might feel some concern about joining Masonic Lodge because they are different, because they have those different abilities and or disabilities. What's your advice to those guys who are thinking about that, who might be listening to this? What do you say to that man that you run into who finds out you're a Mason and he's got that concern? Maybe I'd be joining, except I'm different.
I think, to be frank, our fraternity has not always been as inclusive as it could be, whether that's for our African-American brothers or our disabled ones.
Sure. It's
slowly changing because we have younger past masters like ourselves, but we still have a lot of work to do on inclusion. Yet, there are wonderful lodges. There are many wonderful, wonderful brothers in the craft who want to learn more, who want to do better. And so it really requires finding the right lodge and be kind of building those strong one-on-one relationships with brothers. And I would say that to do that, contact me, contact perhaps other brothers where you have kind of shown up for an event. You've been there and you felt welcome, because there are many lodges that make brothers and individuals feel very welcome in the state of Maryland and other jurisdictions.
Corinthian Lodge number 93, the lodge that you're a part of Corinthian now, is that correct?
I am. I serve as chaplain, right. And I feel very comfortable and very welcome there.
And pardon my confusion, but there are 3 lodges that meet in that same building, and often when I visit there, I'm not sure which lodge it is I'm sitting in. I know a lot of guys, but when I go there to that place to visit, I'm not sure which lodge is open. So pardon my ignorance on which one is which. But
I don't think it's your ignorance. Maybe we could do a better job at kind of defining what meets when and where, but also kind of working together within the temple. Unfortunately, without doing being able to do events, it was harder to kind of bring all the lodges together like I wanted to when I was master. But basically, as a framework, there's a great lodge, Concordia, that meets on Monday evenings. Mount Moriah meets on Tuesdays, and now Corinthian, where I'm chaplain, meets on Wednesday nights. And then, of course, we have the Eastern Star, and we also have the Tuscan chapter of the Royal Arch that also meet in the building.
And I think you guys have a pretty active Job's Daughters chapter.
Job's Daughters as well. I forgot that one.
I know that as a Joby dad. The reason I bring that up is that your lodge, Corinthian number 93, when my friend Joe Kramer, who we've mentioned previously, was master, one of the cool things about that lodge, and we tried to do some film on it, and it just didn't end up working out because of schedules. You had a night at that lodge where side by side, initiated and then passed and raised on different evenings, obviously, were a Christian man, a Jewish man, and a Muslim man, all at the same altar, all at the same time, and that's just such a unique.
Yes.
And you talk about younger lodges that are building that inclusivity, and I think that Corinthian has done an exemplary job of that. And just not just with having a worshipful master and a chaplain who had a visual impairment, but with people of different religions. I think we say a lot we're open to many different faiths, but when you look down, kind of at the broad scale of things, maybe we could do a better job at being inclusive.
I was incredibly proud of that evening. I would say as a human, but also, of course, as a Mason. That evening was one of my favorite evenings in Masonry to date, I think, in many ways. I delivered the middle chamber lecture that evening. I think, hopefully, this is still correct. By memory, we conferred a second degree that night on those three brothers. One thing that I always did, or that I have always done before degree work, and certainly, especially as a master, is I would always go and pray at the altar, and then I would usually tap on it when I was ready. And I made sure that night to feel all the holy books of law. So I felt the Bible, I felt the Quran, and then I felt also the Tanakh, as I learned is the actual name for the Jewish holy book of law. And that was just a powerful evening. Then as now, I was so very proud of my good friend and brother, Joe Kramer, for orchestrating that.
It really, it's talk about putting your money where your mouth is. You're going to, this is what we stand for. We're men of all, it doesn't matter what name you call God. We're going to come here and we're going to be brothers together and put aside our differences and just work on being the best men we can be. And
in that regard, of course, I almost forgot that night, of course, the current worshipful master, he may have been like senior deacon then. Either way, Joe Frank, he served as my side of guide that evening. And it's been since then that I've had also a very special, rich relationship with him, and that I have felt like I'm a brother who happens to be blind with him and a whole lot of the brothers at Corinthian.
Gary, I can't thank you enough for joining us. That's Brother Gary Norman, past master of Mount Moriah Lodge, and I appreciate you sharing your stories about your lodge experience and your experience with Brother Pilot and Brother Bowie. I love that they are considered brothers in your lodge. I hope that I get to sit in lodge with you and Brother Bowie sometime very soon. If you want to see photos of Brother Gary and his companions, Brother Pilot and Brother Bowie, please check out the September 2022 issue of the Scottish Rite Journal. And in the meantime, that's going to wrap things up for this edition of the Tyler's Place podcast. If you've got comments, questions, ideas, whatever, just reach out. podcast@scottishrite.org is the email address. And don't forget, check out our YouTube channel and Spotify for a lot of great Scottish Rite and Freemasonry content. And if you're interested in Freemasonry, you're not a Mason, visit beafreemason.org to connect with a lodge near you. That's beafreemason.org, and that'll connect you with a lodge near you so you can get started on your journey into Freemasonry. And if you're interested in the Scottish Rite and you're already a Master Mason, well, just drop me an email, podcast@scottishrite.org. I'll hook you up. I'm Maynard Edwards, and I'll catch you next time right here on the Tyler's Place.